the cloud. Okay. Welcome. It's good to have you here at Nominations and Charge Conference in Simplified Structure. Let me share my screen. And you'll see here, this is what we're doing today. We are going to be covering this. If we have simplified structure, how do you do a nominations page? How do you build these teams that do this kind of work? And so my hope for you all today is that we can cover some of this material and we'll have it recorded so that you can come back later or share it with others. I will also have all the slides I'm showing, I'm going to have available as a download. So don't think, oh, I have to write everything down real quick or take a picture of the screen. Nope. I will provide all those, the link that you can just download the PDF and you'll have it all available to you. So please know, anything you see on the screen will be shared to you all. My name is Blake Bradford. I'm the Northwest District Superintendent. I see some Northwest folks and I see some other folks from other districts on this throughout the Arkansas Conference. It's great to have you with us. And I am, in addition to being a superintendent, I wrote this book right here, Mission Possible, which is about simplified structure. And so it's sort of the owner's guide to this kind of work. And I have another couple of books I did, but another one I did was Strengthening Decision-Making and Governance. So I've done a lot of thinking around this area of ministry, of how we do leadership. And I think it's really important. It's not, as I said, it's not just getting people in slots. It's a lot deeper than that. It's about building the team we need to do God's mission in the world. So as we move forward, I encourage y'all to take notes, write questions down in the chat, and we will go forward from this point with some of the material. So the process that you all that are in this, using this structure, or maybe you're about to change over, is a disciplinary process. In paragraph 247.2, the church can modify your organizational plans. And that's a really good open spot there. So it's based on the ministry of the church, and notice the consultation with and approval of the DS, you can modify your organizational plans as long as you are still fulfilling the core aspects of ministry. And the system I'm going to show you, because there's a couple of other simplified structure systems out in the world. One that was real popular, and I think it was Iowa or Idaho or something like that several years ago. The system I'm going to show you allows the simplified, some people call it one board structure. I'm not a fan of that name, but it's fine. That one committee, one board kind of operating for the administrative work. It operates with that, but it does it in such a way that all the discipline requirements for all the committees are still maintained. So you're never even thinking about crossing over against what the discipline requires for the committees. We just happen to have the committees all under one structure. So I'm going to explain that in full detail, but I just want to say real clear on the front end, we are not getting around the discipline. We're not disobeying the discipline. We are using a disciplinary process and then maintaining all aspects of the discipline in our final version of the structure. The this chart can look a little complicated, but let's actually break this one down. So at the top of our org chart, in a company, you might have an org chart, right? At the top of the org chart is Jesus Christ and the Great Commission. We need to be really clear whose church this is. No matter what it says on the deed, who really owns the church is Jesus Christ. And the Great Commission is at the top. And then we have a church or charge conference. That's our connection to the annual conference. It's the primary governing body. But that doesn't meet just, you're not going to be meeting in the charge conference monthly or weekly or doing day-to-day business. So you have a executive team that serves function and that of the administrative committee. So in the simplified accountable structure, your leadership board serves as the church council, it's the trustees, it's the staff parish committee, and it is the finance committee, all rolled into one board with one chair. And now people hear that, and when we were using the term one board structure, they thought, oh, there's only one committee, get rid of all the committees. No. Notice underneath that leadership board is different ministry teams. You still have your ministry team that builds wheelchair ramps, your ministry team that does worship, maybe a building maintenance team, a food pantry team, different committees and ministries, Sunday school leaders, all that still exists. But it's the administrative and governance functions, the strategy, the accountability are all in that leadership board. Now, the United Methodist Discipline requires for local churches to have a separate nominations committee. And you see that little box off to the side. And the reason is the board is never able to nominate itself, to self-nominate. So you still keep a separate nominations committee. And remember, the pastor is the chair of the nominations committee. So that's why you see a blue box off to the side. So that is separate. It's a separate piece. And that's for accountability, because you put a lot of energy and a lot of authority in one board. If you're going to do that, you need to have a separate committee that holds that group accountable. So, if they need to be taken off the committee, not rotated back the next cycle, figuring who needs to be on that group for those 3-year terms. That's the role of that nominating committee. So let me change slide here. Another piece, the image I use is different hats. So what's involved? One board with several hats. And if you notice on the table here, you got a finance hat, a staff parish hat, there's a trustee hat, there's an administrative council hat. There's all these different hats, that are used. And the idea is not that, Bob gets the finance hat and Sally gets the trustee hat. And nope, everyone puts the hat on simultaneously. As you think about the agenda of your committee, you say, okay, well, we're going to talk about the building now. Everybody put on your trustee hat. The whole committee, 9 people, all of you, put on your trustee hat. Oh, we're going to talk about finances. Everyone put on your finance hat. And just imagine, like, everyone has these hats in front of them, and they put on the hat that's needed. Now, and that means all the administrative functions are vested in the single leadership board. Now, one suggestion from, it's now a number of years ago, but in really early versions of this that was being shared around, and this is the model that began in Missouri for the most part. There was a suggestion of using reps or specialists. Like, okay, you have 9 people on the board. Well, 3 of you are staff parish specialists and 3 of you are trustee specialists. I will tell you right now, that does not work. We do not recommend it. It's not a good idea. There's not just a trustee on the board, or you 3 are the finance. Nope. The whole committee operates in unison. All 9 are trustees. All 9 are finance committee. Now, you may have an assignment that's separate, like, okay, we need to build a budget. Let's build a work team. You see that little gold work team over in the corner of that separate hat. We need to build a work team to work up a budget. So if a couple of board members and the pastor and maybe, this other person here is good with thinking about money and finances, and they're a member of the church. This other person is really involved in a lot of ministries that use a lot of the funds. Let's have that team get together, come up with a draft budget, and they come up with the draft budget, bring it to the whole leadership board, and we'll look at it, do any amendments. And that's how we get our budget. Another example might be, well, we need to do a personnel policy. I know that, John over here, he is in HR at his business. Let's get John, let's get a couple of board members together to do a draft HR policy, personnel policy to bring to the board. Another example is we have a safe sanctuary policy that needs to be approved, or safe gatherings. Well, in that case, it'd be like, okay, we need one of our board members to team up with our children's ministry person and our youth ministry person. And some churches have a daycare, and maybe we have somebody that's involved in a lot of youth and scouting and other stuff. Maybe someone who works with vulnerable adults. Let's let them team up, write the draft policy using their information and their expertise, bring it to the leadership board, and then we'll do questions, amendments, and do a finalization of that policy. So you notice you can use people for different projects, but at the end of the day, the whole board is responsible for everything done by the board. And so when you compose your committee, you don't have to think about, well, I need 3 math people and I need 3 people that's good with person. Nope, the whole board does all the work. And you can send off projects, but at the end of the day, the whole board is accountable for all the work. Now, that leads you into the next question I have. What are we looking for in a leadership board member? Well, first of all, we're really looking for faithful disciples of Jesus who represent the diversity of the church and have the spiritual gifts of leadership. What I mean by that is, if all kinds of diversity, what age, tenure, I think theological diversity, race, every diverse, male, female. You want a team that looks like the congregation. And the reason is you need all those eyes that look like the congregation in all of age groups, everything, to be, to be your leadership. And so you don't need someone who's the finance person. You need someone who's a faithful disciple. You can have people help with financial stuff. But the first thing you need to look at is, are they a disciple of Jesus, and work from there. You've placed a lot of authority in this one board. The people on this board you need to start with thinking them as faithful disciples. So when I use the image of using all the hats, I talk about, the different hats out in front. I will say this, in some ways, you also need to put all the hats together. And so you see the funny thing, I've actually got one. Here you go. So here's where I really earn my money. I'm going to put on the silly hat. So I got my silly hat on, right? So there we go. Anyway, I'm being goofy today, but I love this hat because it reminds me that I don't just, when the board members are meeting, I'm not just a yellow hat wearing trustee or a blue hat wearing finance person. My job is to have all the hats on simultaneously. And here's why we talk about this. One of the problems with the system that we inherited with all the committees is that it's been really easy for us to silo challenges or opportunities, so that when it comes to a challenge before the life of the church, the finance committee says, well, that looks like a finance problem, and they only have finance tools to deal with it. The staff parish committee says, nah, I think it's a personnel problem. Let's fix it with personnel. The trustees are thinking, if only our building had this done, or, by separating out people into committees and siloing, we're not able to have a holistic view, a holistic leadership lens on the challenges and opportunities that are before your church. A perfect example is when the pandemic hit in March 2020, and it had personnel, financial, building, safety, insurance, ministry, consequences. And instead of dealing with the challenge as one group, we instead had 4 different committees trying to solve it with only a toolbox that was partially full. And this simplified committee leadership board can use all the tools at the disposal. And my hope is that the committees that you build are able to go to the balcony, have a big view of the situation, and use all the tools God's given your church to take on challenges and opportunities God has for you. Now, simplified structure, the building of that committee. As I said, there's 9 members and 3 annual classes. That means, that you have people who in 3-year groups, they have 3 terms. You have 3 groups. They have 3-year terms. It adds up to 9. You include in that total the board chair. You may also include the lay member annual conference and the lay leader. We'll talk about that. Anyone, if you want to be a trustee, they got to be 18 years old. So if you have a 9-member board, but one of your members is a youth, and that happens sometimes, and they're not 18, they cannot be listed as a trustee unless they're 18. So you would only have 8 trustees. Notice again, a separate nominating committee is required. Now, I'm reading that, and I know that's hard to figure out. So I'm going to actually show you the nominations form. Oh, I get a question. So UMW is not required. That is correct. If your rules require it in your local church, that's fine. But United Methodist Women, United Methodist Men, I'm sorry, I should be calling it United Women in Faith. This is an old slide. United Methodist Men and Youth. It is optional in the simplified structure how you want to have that person a member of the board or a ex officio. How do you want to deal with that person? And you'll see why in a second. So here's the deal with the nomination structure. Now take a look at this. This is the form that was handed out as part of your charge conference forms. And you'll note in that the top part is about the board itself. And there's 3 classes, and I'll make this bigger in a second. But the 3 classes, that's 6 to 9 people elected for 3-year terms, divided into 3 classes with each, the terms. Now, so that first group there, that's your committee. Now, the United Women of Faith, the Methodist Men and Methodist Youth reps, if you want to use that, if it's utilized and your church can make the decision, these may be elected to the board and therefore voting members, or they may be ex officio without vote. Now, for instance, if there's an individual on that board and they're elected to the class of 24 or 23 or whatever, if they are also the UMW rep, if she's the UMW rep and she's elected to a class, that's fine. You can do double duty. That's perfectly fine. And again, your board can build this the way you want, but it's flexible here, but you just need to decide which group they're in and if they're in a role where they're kind of double-hatted or not. If you look at church officers, all except the treasurer are elected board members in the top section. So you'll just pull a name down. And so in that section of the church officers is provided so that it can be really crystal clear who are considered officers for the purposes of our database, and just be really clear who has authority. And as you see at the bottom, a separate 3 to 9 member nominating committee is required. And this committee is independent from the leadership board. It's chaired by the pastor. Because of some of the rules, oftentimes the members on a small church, the members of the nominating committee may actually be spouses of members of the board, because you cannot have spouses members of the board. Let me make this a little easier by showing the next slide. So here's the actual board. 1/3 of the board rotates off every year. You see how. So you see the first class, there's 9 people on this board. John, Carol, and Yolanda would rotate off on December 31st of 23. Jennifer, Ben, and Larry, they'll be rotating off in 24. And Sue, David, and Debbie would rotate off on December 31st, 25. And every year you submit this form, like Jennifer, Ben, and Larry, that their block would move up a tier, and Sue and them, they'd move up a block, and then you add 3 more names to the bottom, and you work the rotation. You see how you do that 3-year term. Now, and if you notice on the side, you can indicate board chair and vice chair. I went ahead and wrote UMW Methodist Men. I'm sorry, I'm stuck on UMW. I've been saying that for decades, and I'm having a really hard time getting United Women in Faith, but I will get there. I'm going to work on that. I have my lay member to annual conference. I have my lay leader. I wrote all that down on that. and that's fine. You can put all those comments, but we really need to know who the chair and the vice chair is. As you look at this, there's also another option for really small churches, because I know 9 people might be hard to get, especially if they have to be unrelated. So here's what you can do. You can have 6 people. You can have 6 people. And that means you, instead of 3 in every class, you have 2 in every class. Now, I want to say there's some other rules on this as you look at it. Remember, there again, you can't have household members they can't serve together. Another rule, because that's a staff parish rule, and this is your staff parish committee. Another rule is that this board is your trustees. And remember, board of trustees has a rule on gender, numbers of men and women on the committee. You need to have at least 3 men and at least 3 women on the committee. So if you have a group of 9, you see, when I add it up, what I try to do is make sure every class has a male and a female, at least a male and a female. What I'm trying to do is make sure at least, so at the end of the day, 1/3 is women, 1/3 men is the minimum. And so by making sure I don't have one class of all women or one class of all men, that'll mess me up later. So as we move through the classes and through the years. So just try to make sure you have at least 1/3 happening every cycle. I'm going to pop over the next slide. Now, here's the same people. I have that up here. Then I figure out, okay, so who are the elected leaders? Well, Jennifer Jackson is the board chair. Ben Black's the lay leader. Monica Moneypenny is the treasurer. Jennifer Jackson, who's the board chair, is also the staff parish contact. And so her name's in there again. That's pretty standard. I expect to see my staff parish contact probably be the board chair. And in fact, I would expect the trustee chair, when they're elected in January, I'd expect that to be Jennifer Jackson as well. The reason is, in a simplified structure, we do expect to have one chair. And that's the main contact and organizer of the agenda and all that. It makes it a little easier, so there's not triangulation. It makes it really clear who's leading the meeting. You're not like moving the gavel around depending on the topic at hand. I perfectly expect that. Now, churches can do a little different, and that's okay. But I want you to know, on our end, we expect to see that name. We're not at all surprised to see, in this case, Jennifer Jackson serve as board chair, staff parish chair, and trustee chair. In a simplified structure, that's normal. So anyway, look through here and you kind of see how we arrange this. And if you notice, the committee nominations, you don't have to have 9. You can have, you can run with 6 or even 3 board members there on nominations. But they all need to be done in classes. They all need to be done in classes. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next slide. Again, I just said some of these. Your 6 and 9 elected board members, 1/3 men, 1/3 women. As legal trustees, everyone needs to be 18 if they want to be a trustee. Household members cannot serve together. Family members of staff cannot serve on the board. If you're a lay member to annual conference is this pastor's spouse, guess what? They cannot be a voting member, and they need to leave the room whenever you do staff parish stuff. That's just the way it works. I'm never a big fan of having pastor spouse be the lay member of annual conference, but I know it happens. But just know that there are limits on their ability to be in the room or be involved or even get some of the emails because of the privacy rules of staff parish. Here's another note. As I said, the usual committee is 9 members dividing the 3 classes. Now, I'm gonna add, this is for extra complicated. I know that your lay leader and your lay member to annual conference, they, by the discipline, are not required to have a 3-year term. Also, I'm very aware that often the lay member to annual conference is someone who might have had that position for a good number of years. And that's who the church loves to send. And they love going and, going and hanging out at hot springs and all that. And that's a really hard job to just rotate on every 3-year basis. There is another way to approach that job. In other words, here's what you can do if your church wants to. You can have your lay member to annual conference and lay leader exist outside the 9 people in the classes. So John, Carol, Yolanda, all them. You can have your lay member and your lay member to annual conference, your lay leader. They can actually exist, and you have a 11-person board plus pastor, not a 9-person board plus pastor. And what that would mean is, whenever the board operates as staff parish or church council or finance committee, all 11 have a vote. The 9 people in classes at the top, plus the 2 additional, lay leader and lay member to annual conference. If, though, it comes to an issue of trustees, they cannot serve as trustees because only the 9 people can serve as trustees. That's a disciplinary limit. So if, for instance, you needed to sign a contract, the lay member to annual conference, lay leader, if you have an 11-person board, they can't sign a contract. They can't, for instance, be filed with the Secretary of State's office if you're incorporated. If you do a building program or remodel or trying to lease the property or lease a parsonage, they cannot be listed as trustees or sign stuff as trustees or vote as trustees in any of those matters if you have that 11-person board. Now, I know that's a lot to say for something that's sort of an exception to the rule, but I just kind of know the nature in Arkansas of how we pick our lay members to annual conference particularly, and sometimes our lay leaders as well. And I just wanted y'all to know that because of they don't have the term limits and all that, they can exist outside that in those 9, and that's sometimes real popular. So that's some of the exceptions we have on size. Now, I'm going to pause here for questions, and you can ask them verbally or on the chat. And that's the main part of my material for today, but I really wanted to answer questions. I know that last year when we did the charge conference in our Northwest district, we had around 50 churches doing this model, and I had to send back about 25 for a little more work. And I decided then last year, that's because I haven't done a good job explaining the principles. And so I need to do a better job. And so that's what today's about. So what questions do y'all have? Just be sure to unmute yourself and ask away, or you can put it in the chat. Lonnie, are you asking a question? I see your lips moving.
I have a question.
Yes. Hey there, Lonnie.
I'm sorry. When you're meeting with your leadership group,
yeah,
you say, okay, we're going to talk about trustee matter.
Mm-hmm.
We all put a trustee matter. Do you need to appoint somebody as the lead spokesman, like a chair?
That's a good question. So here's how trustees work. And if you, I'm gonna share my screen again. So here's the board, and you notice trustee is down here. You see this at the kind of down here toward the bottom, right above nominations. I know it's really small print, but if you have a charge conference document, you've seen this before. So every year in the first meeting of the year by the discipline, you have to elect your trustee chair. Now, that trustee chair will most probably, and I really recommend it to be your board chair. So you have one chair of everything. Now, that's your chair. In this case, I listed, Jennifer Jackson. She's the class of 2024. She's in slot number 4 there, Jennifer Jackson. So she's the trustee chair. So if you have trustee items, that you need to talk about, it's just the chair running the board. I do have like a recommended agenda that your board can use, and I think I may have it in some downloads. But my suggestion is you don't, even though I know I talked about with the different hats, really your board, when they take stuff, they're just taking stuff in that we need to deal with. And a lot of things, it's really hard to file it in one subject or another. So just handle all of it. And Lonnie, here's what I was thinking about that. I remember I served when I served a church in Russellville, Wesley Church. I remember we would come to a meeting and we'd vote on something in trustees, and we go, okay, this is trustees voting on it. Now we're going to have a meeting after this meeting, this finance committee. So we're having 6 o'clock trustees, a 7 o'clock finance, and then tomorrow we'll come and we'll vote on it for the church council. So I had my trustee meeting, we voted on it. And then the next hour, the finance committee came, which is half of the finance committee were also trustees. So, okay, we met, we voted on it. Okay. Then tomorrow we're going to have the church council vote on it. And a church council shows up the next day. And of course, half of the people on the church council or more were trustees or finance committee. So we had to come and vote in 3 meetings to get something done. Nice is you begin with it and you approvals through multiple committees. You run it through one group. And so that's really why this is a powerful team, a powerful way. So you don't need to elect a separate trustee chair, because you elected the chair in January. It's usually the board chair, and that person takes you all year long. Does that answer your question, I hope? Okay, good. What other questions you got, friends? That's a good one.
Like,
Hey, Roger.
I don't know whether you want to get into this or not. We may need to sit down, but my 2 small churches, I've got 4 and 5 people there. I don't
Right.
even have enough attending to have the 6-person
I
committee,
understand.
less and the nominations
Right.
separate as well.
Sure.
You want to talk, you want to discuss that today?
Well, this kind of falls under do the best you can.
Okay.
I think the best way to do it is probably to run 3 people, if you can, as a class of 23, 24, 25.
Okay.
So that means there is a technical rotation, and you work with what you got there. And then you and another person can be the nominating committee.
Okay.
And now, that's the best adjustment I have in that case. But with that model that I just described, that means that when you look at your sheet, I'll share it again. I'm going to actually go back a few. Yeah, here we go. When you look at your sheet, in that case, that very small church, you just have a person in column 1, a person in column 4, and a person in row 11. And that's your group.
Okay.
And I think that'd probably be the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
Again, we're talking about our smallest churches there. Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. What else we got, friends? What else? Okay, so I've got a question for y'all as y'all are kind of thinking about it. And so I want you to be processing this. If you're already using this model, think about what changes you need to make it legal. One change that a lot of churches need to make is they did the version where you have a 9-person board, but we have 3 finance and 3 trustees. We really need to make it so you have your whole board to be the whole committee. Okay, that's a big change that folks need to shift to. Another big change that happens is not having clear classes. The reason I've been showing this a lot and is what I don't want to see is John, Carol, and Yolanda being in 1, 2, 3, and then John, Carol, Yolanda in 24, and John, Carol, Yolanda in 25. I'd much rather see, for example, in a small church, what I just told Roger, put John in line 1, another one in line 4, and another line 7, because you need to have a rotation being shown. And that's for legal reasons, like, as your incorporated disciplinary following entity, you need to have the classes rotate. Even if you have to just rotate the same person back through, it needs to show a rotation. So that's a big change that I see folks doing. Another change is, you notice how I limited it at 9 people. In past documents, I had a little more flexibility for more complex structures. We have removed the complexity out of this. There's 9 because that's the rule. Think about it this way. If you look in the discipline, staff parish is 9, plus you can have your lay member and lay annual conference addition. That's 11. Trustee, there's a hard limit of 9. If you're trying to have a lot more people on there, I guess you could do it with ex officios or something. But if you feel like you need to have 15 or 20 people on your board, you're not really doing simplified structure. What you're doing is making a big old board. And that means your church might not be ready for this model because there's not enough internal trust. So just be real mindful that, the point of this is to have a smaller group that's more nimble. And the 6 to 9 rule is your standard, is the expectation, with the 9 being the hard limit on classes. So really 11, if you have those 2, you can't have more than that and still stay legal without doing some really creative stuff. And you'd have to talk with me about how to pull that off. Any other questions?
When can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Bob.
To change to this structure, when do we need to meet with you to get approval?
So thank you. So I'll tell you, I'll put it this way. I'm going to unshare again. Thank you, Bob. So in our smaller churches, I have pretty much automatic approval to switch over. Okay. Just give me a call, send me an email, say, hey, we're wanting to switch over this year. I'll say, great, follow the rules, ask me if you have any questions. Now, if you're at a little bit larger church, full-time appointments, things like that, we need to have more of a process involved. And I'll walk with you through it. I'm happy to do that, but it's going to have to be a little more involved of a process. But most smaller churches are operating this way de facto, but not de jure, not by the rule. So what we're really doing is turning the system to fit your actual reality right now. Does that make sense? And so my job here is just to help you get your forms to match your current reality. And so you just give me a note of, hey, we're going to do this. I'm like, okay, great. Awesome. Go for it. Fill out your charge conference documents, use this system, just mark that you're moving to it for the first year, just follow the rules, and we got it. We're good to go. Again, the larger, more complex churches, we need to have a conversation. We might need to do a 2-step process. The reason I like to have a little more conversation with our more complex churches is because if these churches are running with multiple committees that are all different people, and you suddenly turn to the chair trustees and all trustees, oh, by the way, your committee isn't meeting anymore. We put all your powers in this one board, and you turn to staff parish and told them that too. They just found out one random day. They're going to be kind of upset, y'all. And it's going to have a lot of blowback and a lot of trust issues. So we need to go through a bit of a discernment process and a transition process in our more complex, larger churches, so that no one feels devalued. No one feels like you're trying to do a power play. It's all on the up and up. And so that your final board is all that it needs to be in a larger, more complex church to do the job God needs it to do. So I know it sounds like I have 2 separate sets of expectations. It's really just an awareness of the reality at different size churches. And so I'm here to help in either place. Bob, thank you so much for that question. But we can get you hooked in this year, starting January 1. We'll be good to go.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. You bet. What other questions we got, friends?
Like, it's Roger again.
Hey, yes, sir.
Waldron had been approved for the simplified structure before I became pastor there.
Okay.
And after listening to your instructions today, I will be the first to tell you that they've made a mess out of attempting to change over to this. The classes are messed up and too many people in there. Is it okay if we start in 2022 and just wipe the slate clean and
Yeah.
start over with everything? Okay,
Yeah. And I think just have a little note that we're doing a refresh of the structure. Okay. But hey, Roger, don't feel bad that it's hard to do. Look, I literally wrote a 300-page book on how to do this,
okay.
which is ironic in so many ways. I had to write 300 pages to make something simple. Let's be honest about the irony there. But the reason it's hard for us is because we inherited over generations a current organizational system. And it was perfectly designed for the era it was built for. What we found, though, is in today's time, in the 2020s, the world's really different. The challenges are different. We need a structure that meets the challenges of today. But with this inherited structure that we learned over decades, it's hard to just switch a light like a switch and light switch. And so I am not at all surprised it was difficult and makes sense. That is why we're here to help get you there. And no one has to feel bad about it. Just say, okay, hey, we learned some stuff. If you notice, district, we did that. We simplified in 2018. What did we do this year? We did a revision because we took 4 years and learned stuff, right, at the district level. And so our district's restructured this year because we had years worth of, wow, we learned some stuff over the last 4 years. And so we did a revision. So Roger, same thing for y'all. Just print in, we're doing a revision. That sounds great. I look forward to seeing what you come up with, and I'm here to help. Who else?
Hey, Blake.
Hey, Mike.
So I know that the household members cannot serve together on the committee, on the leadership team.
Right.
If one of those people is the lay, say the lay leader, and you choose the option to have them operate in addition to that 9.
Right.
So is that a violation of what you're saying?
Yes.
If they're removed on trustee?
Yeah, they if they're separate, it doesn't matter. You cannot have households serve together on that committee. And the reason is on the board, and the reason is just like I wouldn't allow in a traditional structure. If your lay leader is there and one of the members of staff parish, there's a spouse, well, then the lay leader cannot be a part of staff parish.
Okay.
And so there's no difference on the simplified structure.
Okay.
The reason is there's a very clear rule that household members cannot serve on staff parish together. Since this board is your staff parish board, that means the same rules apply. Here's why it's and Roger, you too. Here's why it's so complicated to do simple. Every qualification and every rule of all the constituent committees all apply simultaneously. All the qualifications and rules for trustees, all of them for staff parish, all of them for finance, all of them for your church council, all those rules, all those qualifications all apply simultaneously. And, church council has certain rules about I think, if they're member or not, and staff parish has member, but trustees, it doesn't have, like if you're a professing member or not, but it does have rules on how many men and women. Staff parish has rules on household members. All those rules from all the different groups, you have to line them up and make it all apply simultaneously to one group of people. And that's why folks get kind of tied up in the process, because you have to flip around in different parts of the discipline to make sure you're obeying all the rules. But once you build it and your nominations committee keeps the rules in mind, then it becomes easier to kind of keep it rolling. That first year is a big learning curve. But once you get that first year in, just cycle through. And every cycle you add 3 people and you lose 3 people and you cycle through.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. Okay, I got time for maybe one more question if there is one.
On the
And Bob, are you
simplified,
talking? I heard somebody else.
on the simplified structure, are we
Yes.
still, is there still supposed to be a roll-off year? Like the ones that roll off in 22 will not be able to save it?
I highly suggest it. Yes, there's a lay fallow year. I know in some very small churches that can't be done, and I have grace. But if I have a more complex church with a larger population to pull from, and they're doing it, I gotta say, and so, and at most, I might say, you need to do like kind of the tradition of some committees, and as you get 2 cycles, that's 6 years, but then you really, really need to lay fallow. But again, our very, very small churches, we got to have some grace here. So that's what I do. Bob?
What about grandmother and grandson serving on the same committee?
That's okay, but the rules about household.
Okay, well, they don't live in the same house.
Then we're all good.
Okay.
Yeah, the rule in the discipline's household. Good question. Okay, so here's what we're going to do with this information. All these slides are going to be on I'm going to have them on a page, a website, along with a copy of this video. And I'm going to have it available. Becky will send out links to anyone. But here's what you need to do. If you want a link to all this, email Becky Neighbors. Y'all know how to get a hold of her, right? You email all the time. Email her, say, hey, give me a link to the video. We'll send you a link that has the video and the slideshow, and you can have that available. And we may also, I think I've also got some other resources if you want to pull from. I'll show you that. Let me just go and put that online. Let me see here. A moment. Okay. Let me do my last slide here. So if you have questions about transitioning, contact your district office, ask your district superintendent. If you're serving another district other than mine and want to talk to me, just get permission from your superintendent. I don't do that without, just like you wouldn't want a pastor messing your stuff. DSs don't want another DS messing in their stuff. So, get permission. Lastly, I do have on my personal website some more resources, including some free ones like downloads. And I did with Keiko Tan a training seminar for discipleship ministries in Nashville. The board discipleship is a 2-session training on simplified structure. It's usually it'd be a full day workshop or something. So I did a two module video training that is recorded for discipleship ministries, and it explains the process in a lot more detail. And if you want to, you can grab that, view it, use it, send it to your lay leadership, whatever you want to do. We did that for the denomination, and I hope that's useful for y'all. So that's all some things on that BlakeBradford.org, just so you know. Along the way, please know I appreciate you, just huge appreciation for you as leaders in the church. Know that I pray for you, and know that I think you're doing amazing kingdom work in each of your mission fields. So thank you so much, and I wish you a great rest of the day. God bless.